Good morning and happy Sabbath. Oops, is there anybody here? Good morning, happy Sabbath. Hey. Just a quick question. If Jesus was to come in person this morning to church, where would he sit? Be careful how you answer, okay? Where would he sit? Next to you. Just remember what you said, all right? He would sit next to me actually as well. So, okay. I'll answer the question in a little bit. I have to thank Brother Swain for looking after my PowerPoint. He helped me, and if there are any glitches, it's my fault, okay? It's my fault completely. Okay. The topic is where the wild things are. And it's based on the scripture which was read for us. And this is interesting because that little phrase there, and he was with the wild animals, does not occur in Matthew or Luke in the stories of the temptations of Jesus. It only occurs in Mark. And commentators have said, why? What did Mark intend to say? There are three interpretations. One, Mark was trying to give us location, geography. He was away from civilization. He was not in a safe place. He was where the animals are wild. So it's a geography. When we were living in Egypt, you could go in the vehicle and stop, and it's green all around you. And then you walk 100 yards or so, and the water runs out, and it's desert. And a little further, and you're in a dangerous area because there's snakes and lions and all sorts of creatures out there. So that's where Jesus was, location, okay? Secondly, it could have been symbolic. He wasn't in the Garden of Eden where everything was fine and wonderful, and he could do anything he wanted because God was there in the garden feeding. He wasn't in... He was where sin is, where sin had wrought its poison and had broken relationships. That's where he was. The third one, and by the way, you don't have to choose which you think. Maybe all of them are correct, okay? The third one is it's thematic. He goes to where the wild things are. He wants to be where the wild things are. Why? Because he's bringing the wild things and angels together. And there's a message there for us. And when you look at this, the Gospel of Mark, we just recently had a whole quarter on it. The Gospel of Mark happens to be the Gospel that I've read the most about, read the most commentaries about in my own experience. And I did notice that none of the lessons touched on this one little phrase. But immediately after that, you begin to see the stories that Mark lists for us. First is the story of a demon-possessed man. Oh, not there yet. Okay, there it is. A demon-possessed man now saved. So Jesus goes to the synagogue, and there's a man who's demon-possessed. And the demon focuses on Jesus' message, and Jesus demands the demon let go. He's there to be with wild people. We would probably not want to sit next to that man. And then the next story is he goes out and there's a man who comes up to him and says, Jesus, if you care, would you heal me? He's a leper. And lepers live out away from civilization. They don't live with normal people because they're unclean. But he's now welcome because Jesus went and met him. And then there's a man who comes down through the roof. And Jesus brings forgiveness immediate. He comes to be healed. He didn't come for forgiveness. He came to be healed. But Jesus meets his need first, prioritizes his need, and says, you are forgiven. The man didn't ask for it, but Jesus gives him forgiveness. The next story is the call of Matthew, and I'm working my way through the Gospel of Mark, chapters 1 and 2. And in the next story, it's the call of Matthew. Now he's walking past Matthew, and Matthew is not sitting there going, "Oh, I hate being a tax collector. I wish I was a disciple." And Jesus walks past and says, "Matthew, come, follow me." And Matthew leaves what he's doing and follows Jesus. And they go to his house, and he invites all his friends. Now his friends are not Pharisees and Sadducees. He doesn't know any of those. His friends are prostitutes and tax collectors and sinners. But Jesus likes to be with people like that. And there are other stories. There's the demoniac of Gadara. Jesus wants to be with lost people. He goes to where he knows this man is. And then there's the Syrophoenician woman, the mother with the possessed daughter. And the disciples say to Jesus, "Tell her to go away. We don't want her in our company." But not Jesus. He's with wild things. Or how we define wild things. Are you one of the wild things that he wants to sit next to this morning? If you want Jesus to sit next to you, you better admit that you're a wild thing. Okay? That's just the truth. Sorry, but that's the truth about you. Scripturally, biblically, you're a wild thing. Because you have in you some wildness. I appreciate the Sabbath school lesson this morning. And she touched on it. And I think this quarter's lessons are really important because in the end, what defines us as a church is the character of God. And that character is a God who loves us deeply and seeks to be with us. And we need to get that clear. It is God who seeks us. When Adam and Eve fell, God didn't leave them. He came after them, came looking for them, because he loves to be with wild things. And the whole sanctuary service is not a service about how we can make oneness with God and go and be with him. It's a service how he wanted to be in the midst of his people. Because look, God cares about wild things. And Jesus is not impressed by Pharisees saying prayers on street corners or in their long robes and giving large donations or bright and shiny clean hands. He's not impressed by that. What does impress him is people who recognize their lostness. Do you recognize your lostness? If you do, he loves to be with you. One of our hymns has the line, "Prone to wander, prone to leave the God I love." And Jesus is a friend of you. He's a friend of sinners, not sinners who think they're holy, but sinners who know they are lost. That's why he seeks legion, common fishermen, prostitutes, lepers, tax collectors, Syrophoenician women in adultery. He is driven to bring wild things into the company of angels. This message sounds so simple. It really is. But we as a church have to work out, what does the love of God have to do with us as a denomination? We need to have so much love of God in us, amongst us, that when people come to visit our church, they go, "Wow, those people are so different. They really do love one another." It's a story, that's our gospel. It's a story of the person who comes looking for us because he wants to be with us. He wants to be with you. No matter how you feel spiritually, he wants to be with you. In fact, the more you feel unworthy, the more he loves to be with you. But there is that issue of the war with our own natures. I'm going to skip over that for a minute and come back to it. This is Romans chapter 7, and Eileen referred to it this morning in the Sabbath school lesson. "For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Now if I do what I do not want, it's no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me." There's a call to recognize that sin dwells in me. "So I find it law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand, for I delight in the law of God in my inner being. But I see in my members another law waging war against the law of my mind and making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my enemies, in my members, sorry. The children's story here referred to our friend, our enemy, and our friend. That's who we've got to have all the time, because he's our Savior, and he's the one who, but his aim is to transform us to be even more like him, and that's our war. Some years ago when I was doing an MA in leadership, one of our tasks was to write out a set of core values. And I thought, well, it'll just take me a couple of minutes. I'll write some good things down and hand it in. And then she said, now this is going to take you about 6 months. And I thought, what? I know what my core values are. Love God, love my neighbor. That's it. And then she started explaining, now core values need to reach into the inner part of you. What hinders you from loving your neighbor? And that became very different. And I'd go home each night and write out my core values and then go, don't like that one. I won't do that, one's too hard. And I picked out easier ones. And then the Spirit would say to me, Llew, you go back to the hard one. That's where you need to change. And it wasn't an easy it was hard. Because each day when I reflected on my day, how my day had gone and measured them against my values, stated values, I found that several times I had broken them. And several times I went back to a store that I'd been in the day before and said to the lady at the counter, can I have a word with you? And she'd say, sure. She said, I hope you remember, but yesterday I was in and I was impatient and rude with you. I want to say I'm sorry. And she'd say, I don't remember that happening. I'd say, well, it did, and I'm sorry, because that's not the kind of person I want to be. I want to be gentle and patient and forgiving at all times. You can be rude to me, but I must not act badly back to you. And it happened several times, that's the problem. And I kept thinking, God, change me. Help me to change and live for you, because that's what I want to be. It's the battle that I'm going on, that Paul is talking about in Romans 7. That this thing inside me that makes me a captive to sin, I don't want that to rule me. And sometimes I do pretty good, and then other times I fall and crash, and not again. And that 6 months of wrestling with my values, and there was some I put off and then put back, and the Spirit said, Llew, you put that back on the list, because that's where you need to fight. And there are times I wish that the Spirit hadn't spoken this, because he made my life hard. But I wanted to be like Jesus. Listen to Spurgeon. Speaking for myself, I can say that often when I'm most earnest in prayer, stray thoughts will come into my mind to draw me off the holy work of supplication. And when I'm most intently aiming at humility, then the shadow of pride falls upon me. Has that ever happened to you? You're praying to God and you realize, my pride is intervening. Do not gracious men generally find it so? If their experiences like that of the Apostle Paul, or like that of many another child of God, whose biography one delights to read, it is so and it will be so. Spurgeon verged on depression so much, because as he searched his own heart, he thought, God, can you do anything with me? And he used to preach to thousands of people and brought thousands of people to God. And he said, God, don't make me proud. Please stop me from being proud. I think we have a lot to learn from him. And now one of my favorite quotes from Christ's Subject Lessons. A noble all-round character is not inherited. In other words, when you give your life to Christ, you don't suddenly become perfect. You're left with the character that you grew up with. It does not come to us by accident. A noble character is earned by individual effort through the merits and the grace of Christ. Now, Eileen made that point this morning. Concentrate on Jesus. That's the only way you got any hope. God gives the talents, the powers of the mind. We form the character. And that's 6 months when I worked on my core values. 5 of them. It was tough, but I sensed that God was saying to me, Llew, be aware of your character. It is formed by hard, stern battles with self. Conflict after conflict must be waged against hereditary tendencies. We shall have to criticize ourselves closely and allow not one unfavorable trait to remain uncorrected. And even to be aware, I just did say I shouldn't have done that. You know, the other day I was in a car park at Lidl, and as I walked past, there was a lady almost on the ground searching under her car, and I said, are you all right? Can I help you? She said, I've lost my pound coin. It was in my hand, she said, and then I was getting the car ready to lock it up, and I dropped it, and I can't see it. And she was searching for it. And I said, hey, I've got a spare pound coin here. Here's a pound coin. And she said, no, I can't take it. I said, if I'm not here when you come, that's all right. But if I am, just stick it on the front of the car there on one of the wipers. I'll see it. It'll be all right. But as I walked off, I thought, why don't I just throw a pound away? And I said, no, God, you want me to be generous, don't you? So I left and went. And later on, I came back. Her car had gone. And there was no pound coin on the window. And I thought, I lost my pound coin. Dear God, I'm sorry about that. Never mind, I'm happy to give. Then I walked around the back of the car to put the shopping in the boot. And there was a pound coin on the floor right under my car, just under the boot lid. I said, God, you're crazy. Picked up my pound coin. I said, Lord, bless that lady. Bless that lady. She got my pound coin, but I think I got hers. It must have dropped and rolled all the way to my car. But that little thing, I thought, Llew, where was your heart during that little process? It's just a very little thing. Let me go back. Okay, there's a book called Where the Wild Things Are. Have anybody of you read this book or looked at it? Oh, I see a couple of people know it. This book was actually banned in some places, banned from schools, banned for children to read. Yet it looks like a children's book. When the author was asked, have you written this for children or adults? He said adults first, and then children. And you actually, I think, have to watch it to get what he's doing. But in The Wild Things, The Adventures of Max, a mischievous young boy who is sent to his room after rebelling against his mother. Has that ever happened in your home? So, Max goes up to bed, and he's not allowed any food. That's the worst thing. You feel that's mother is so unfair. And he goes up to his room, and he's angry. He's really angry. He's ready to throw a patty. Where's Patrick? Apologies for using your name, Patrick. And that takes my mind to somewhere else. Once I saw a video clip of a little boy, probably about Max's age, who's throwing a tantrum in the supermarket because his mother wouldn't buy what he wanted. Have you ever seen that? The kid's going, "Oh, no, I need it." And you think, come on, kid, behave yourself. But in the clip, there's an adult comes along and sees this, and then he copies the kid. He lies down on the floor and acts like the tantrum the kid said. And the kid stops and looks at him and thinks, you're crazy. And he gets up, and the kid gets up, takes his mother's hand and leads her away. Mustn't be near this guy. But the kid realizes, but he's no longer asking for what he wanted because he's realized something. Now, something like that happens to Max. Max goes to bed angry, frustrated, the injustice his mother has done him. He's really upset. And he's lying there in bed and he imagines that the room turns into a little island. And he's, you go there. Sorry. Okay. And he gets in this boat that's there and he sails the boat to this island where the wild things are, the monsters are. But he is so angry that he's not afraid of monsters. And when this monster comes out, and this is a nice looking monster compared to some of the other ones, he growls at him. And the monster growls back, great big claws, and Max has got his wolf suit on. Okay? By the way, you can watch the film on Netflix. Anyway, growling monsters, and Max growls back at them, and the monster gets a fright from Max, and Max says, "Don't you mess with me." And then there's another monster. They're all different kinds of monsters. One's a monster of pride, one's a monster of anger, one's a monster of frustration. And each one, Max goes, "You can't beat." "I will, Johnny." He glares back at them. And then they all begin to say, okay, you're the king. And he said, "No, we'll do a test. We'll do a test. And the test is, who can out-glare the other? Okay, who can look at you and say, yeah, sit there, you got it. Okay, who can glare at you? Have you ever seen a kid go, yeah, have you seen? Or you have good children. Okay. But that glaring, and Max takes them all on one at a time, and he defeats all of them, and they make him the king of the monsters, which he's very happy with. But then he realizes, wait a minute, do I want to be the king of the monsters? King of bad people? He doesn't want that. And when he eventually, there's a lot I'm missing out, but eventually he comes back out of his dream, nightmare sleep, and he's in his own room again, and he's about to lie down and go to sleep when he smells something. He turns the light on, and his mother has brought his food. It's on the table next to his bed, and it's still warm. And he realizes his mother loves him. I don't know if this man was I know he was a Jew. I don't know if he was a Christian or not. But that's what changes us. The realization that somebody loves you. And when they realize that they love you, when you realize that they love you, it changes your thinking. And that's what happened to Max. Well, I'm not here to talk about Max today. I'm here to talk about us. So I'm going to tell you a story in closing. Do you know what a hell's angel is? If there's anybody here who doesn't know what a hell's angel is, they're bad people, okay? Now, there's a guy called Bob. The name's make-believe because it's a true story. Bob is a hell's angel, and one day he damages his jacket. And he goes to a store, a little shop that repairs clothing. And as he walks in, the girl behind the counter, Max is stunned by her. He thinks, wow, she's beautiful. And instead of saying, I've got a jacket here, he goes up and says, would you come out with me? I'd like to take you out for a meal. And she is shocked by this. He says, who do you think you are coming and just talking to me like that? And he suddenly realized how stupid he's been. He steps out. He says, okay. He says, okay, I need you to repair my jacket. And he shows her the tear in the jacket. And she said, we can fix that. She says, this is nearly the end of the day. And she says, we'll do it tomorrow, so come the day after, the jacket will be ready. I think they negotiate price, etc. Anyway, Bob goes away, but all he can think of is this girl. That's all. He's so obsessed with her now. He's got to go back and see her. And on the day he goes back, he forgets about the jacket. He goes up to the desk and says, I am so sorry. And this is a hell's angel saying sorry. I am so sorry for what I said to you, what I did. I am so sorry. But you are very beautiful. And I would like to ask if I could take you out for a meal. And she looks at him and says, well, all right. So they go out for a meal. The jacket's fixed and Bob is happy with it, okay, because she did it. They go out and he asks, can we go out again? And they have a pleasant time and they become friends. Neither of them are Christian. They make friends and eventually, let's call her Mary. Mary is now living with Bob. And Mary also now has a leather jacket with Hell's Angel on the back, and so does Bob. And they got on really well. Until one night, it's a Friday night, they're in bed, and Mary says to Bob, I'd like to go to church tomorrow. Bob goes, what? Mary, we're Hell's Angels. We don't do church. We don't go to church. What are you talking about? She says, I know. but I'd still like to go to church tomorrow. Come on, Mary, he says, we are not going to church. That's it. She says, Bob, if you won't help me go to church or take me to church, I'll find a way of getting there myself. Oh, come on, Mary. All right, I'll take you to church. But you've made a mistake. What? Church is on Sunday. Tomorrow's Saturday. And no churches are on Saturday. And Mary says, there must be one. She said, because when I was a young girl, my neighbors went to church every Saturday. And I knew they were Christian because they were so nice. And they were so kind and blessed me in so many ways. And I want to see those people again. So Bob says, look, Mary, there's no church on Saturday. He gets the phone book and they turn to churches and he starts flipping through. Starts at A. It was probably Anglican. Sunday. 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 And he's working his way down this long list of churches. Sunday. Sunday. Listen, Mary, there's no church that goes to church on Saturday. Mary said, there must be. Keep reading. It's Sunday. Sunday. Saturday. Oh, there's one here that goes to church on Saturday. What is it? He says, Seventh-day Adventist. I've never heard of them, Mary. She said, well, that must be the church. Okay, I'll take you to church tomorrow at this Seventh-day Adventist church. So they go to church, 10 o'clock, it says in the blurb about the church. They go to church, and they, in their leather jackets, they roll up on their motorbike, and the deacon must have been terrified when he saw them coming up the steps into the church, and says, you're welcome, sit where you want. And Bob, who's again not afraid of anyone, walks up and sits at the front, right in the middle, at the front. There's a big guy, and the two of them are sitting there. And the Sabbath school lesson is being taken by the pastor that Sabbath, and he stands up and says, right, friends, our topic today is, and he says the topic, and Bob says, excuse me, yeah? I'm not interested in that topic. He says, I want to know where God is when bad happens. And the pastor said, well, that's amazing. And he says to the church, do you mind if we answer the man's question? And he said, strangely enough, last night, when I was preparing the Sabbath school lesson, I thought, what if somebody was to ask me, where is God when tragedy happens? And he said, I prepared a little study in my head. Do you mind if we do that now? And the whole congregation, it's fine, go ahead. So he does the Sabbath school lesson on what happens, where is God when tragedy happens. At the end of the Sabbath school lesson, end of Sabbath school, Bob sends up he and Mary, and they walk out of the church. And as they're going out of the church, the deacon said, it was so good to have you folks today, but why don't you stay for church? And Bob looks at the man as if he's crazy and says, we did. We just came to church. And the man goes, no, that wasn't church. That was Sabbath school. Church happens in about 15 minutes' time. And Bob goes, this is crazy. And then they walk out and they go home. Anyway, next Friday night, Mary says, Bob, I'd like to go to church again. He said, we went, Mary. We went last week and we agreed just once, go to church. He said, no, we didn't go to church. Didn't you hear the man? Oh, come on, Mary, we were at church. No, we were at Sabbath school, I think he called it. I want to go to church, she says. Okay, we'll go to church. So they go back to church, front row. And the preacher that Sabbath talks about tithing. And Bob clams up. You know what's going on in his mind. Tithing, they want money. And he listens, and then at the end, they walk out. And he says to Mary as they're going home, that's the last time, Mary. She says, why? Because can't you see all they want is your money? Can't you see that? I could have told you that before. All they want is your money. And she says, Bob, we'll talk about it at home. And they go home, and then she says, Bob, that's not what he said. What did he say then? He said, do you want to be blessed? And she said, Bob, do you want to be blessed? And Bob said, well, of course I do. But she said, you give your tithe to God, and God will bless you more than you gave. Isn't that a good deal? Yeah, it's a good deal, but that doesn't happen, Mary. They just take your money. That's all, and tell you you're blessed, and you're not. And Mary says, Bob, let's go once more then. Okay, so they go to church. Bob sits in the front row. Again, and when the offering comes around, he puts in a little wad of money, and that's it. Next Friday night, Mary says, Bob, are we going to church tomorrow, please? She says, no, Mary. Last week I gave the money, and guess what? I got nothing back this week. It's been a miserable week at work. Miserable. And Mary said, when did you give the tithe? She said, didn't you see me? And the offering plate came around, I put it in the plate. That wasn't a fraction of what you earned. Oh, come on, Mary. Do you mean I would have to give about $40 to equip? She said, how much did you give? 15. Bob, you were making a contract with God, and the contract was, if I give my tithe, you will bless me more. Now, if you had someone, the contract was someone that you're working with, and they said, okay, we'll do this if you do that, and then they didn't do it, what would you do? I'd go out and beat them up, he said. That's what happens amongst that part of the world. So Mary says, Bob, don't expect the system to work when you didn't comply. Okay, says Bob, but Mary, do you realize I'm going to be throwing away that amount of money? She said, well, let's try it at least. So they go back to church, front row. And he puts in a bigger wad of money and says to Mary, that's my, what do you call it? Tithe. That's my tithe. And they go home. Next Friday night, Bob goes, Mary, we're going to church tomorrow. And she said, really? Why? This tithe thing works. He said, I got back so much more this week. I'm happy to give that amount each week if I get that much back. What a blessing it was. So they go to church. She sits up the front. The plate comes round. And Bob stands up this time, and he looks at the congregation. He said, I'm putting my tithe in. Last week I gave my tithe, and God really blessed me. I'm putting, by the way, if any of you are not paying tithe, you are stupid. Because this works. It works. Why aren't you giving your tithe? Listen, God's going to bless you. And the pastor's there, and the pastor stands up and says, Bob, can I ask a question? And Bob says, sure. What? What do you do to earn your money? He said, I sell drugs. No, wait a minute. I want you to remember something. Think of the reactions that you just heard around the room. Why did they laugh? Why did maybe some of you went, just think about it. Why did we do that? First time I read the story, I go, I can't believe. Some years ago, I was pastoring a church in England, and I was picking up litter at the front of the church Sabbath morning before church began. And a guy diagonally across the road, which we all knew was a house of ill repute, came walking up to me, and he came and said, are you the pastor here? I said, yes, I am. And he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a note. I don't remember whether it was 10 or 20 pounds. He pulled out and gave it to me. He says, can you put that in the offering for me, please? And I took it. And I put it in the offering for him. A few years later, I became one of the presidents in the field. And I was at a field leaders meeting. There were 5 presidents and union president. We were all sitting at, I can't remember why it came up, but I said, I took offering from a pimp. I took the offering money and I put it in the plate. And 2 of the presidents said, you should not have done that. That is unclean money. It's dirty money. You encouraged him to do wrong. Maybe some of us had the same feeling this morning. Well, the pastor says to Bob, do you mind if we meet, you and Mary and me meet together after church? He said, sure. So they do. And that began a series of Bible studies. After that series of Bible studies, pastor stands up in church one morning at Sabbath school and says to the church, we're going to do church very differently today. I couldn't tell you why earlier, because Bob and Mary have decided to become Adventists and stop being Hell's Angels. And if that news got out to the community, their gang would come round and beat them to pulp. So it's a secret. Oh, after the Sabbath you can tell people because they are leaving today, this afternoon. And we have been in contact with a pastor in another district long far away. And they're going to start a new life there as Adventists. But today, Sabbath school is going to be a wedding. They went through the procedures, the registry stuff before, and this morning they're going to be married here in church. And then after Sabbath school time, there's the main church time. It's going to be a baptism. Bob and Mary are going to be baptized. Then after that, there's a fellowship lunch. But I want you to note there's no collection today because I'd like to appeal to you at the Sabbath school, at the fellowship lunch. There's going to be a big basket. And I'd like you to put your money in there for Bob and Mary as they go to start a new life. Well, we come back to the question, why would God bless the tithe of a drug dealer? The answer is because he loves wild things. He loves hell's angels. And if he loves hell's angels and wants to be with them, guess what? He loves to be with you. Just loves being with you. Even if you recognize how wild you are, and I recognize how wild I am, he still loves to be with us. What an amazing God we have. So where would he sit if he came to church today? He'd sit with the wild ones amongst us. He'd sit with you. May we understand that message and be a blessing to those around us. Thank you.